In 2020, a global pandemic struck the world and will no doubt be considered an extraordinary time in history. A group of local government emerging leaders interviewed staff and residents across many LGAs to gain perspective and insight into how coronavirus has impacted Victorian councils and their communities.
From a leadership perspective, there's definitely a challenge around ensuring that connection is maintained with all of the different teams that you're involved with, and stepping people away from their normal work environment has been a huge lesson for us, and the longevity of that has also been a struggle.
The thoughts and the mindset that we have, the assumptions that we have for things to just be the way that they are. And it's thrown everything out of whack, and we've had to really understand.
I think the biggest change I've had to make is reprioritising our annual plans and our council plans, and deciding what we're not going to do. Obviously, as a council, we'd made a lot of promises around the budgets for things we were going to do in this financial year. And some of those things now won't be possible. So having those conversations with the community and councillors and reworking that plan for the year has probably been the most tricky part of reorganising council.
The most difficult area for me has been that the attention that the pandemic response and relief demands is a very big focus.
I think the main challenge has been just getting the balance right between continuity of existing services and works that we would ordinarily be doing in our sort of BAU mode, and also not losing sight of the longer term transformation work that we're doing as well.
I've really had to think about how to keep myself feeling energised in my work when I don't get to be with people face to face. I'm definitely an extrovert, and I draw a lot of energy from working with people.
Well, I suppose the most difficult change is isolation. I've been a lot luckier than a lot of people because I have my wife with me, so we haven't been sort of shut up by ourselves. I feel sorry for the people who have.
When you're at home, you struggle to do your work because your parents don't know as much as the teachers, and they don't know what you're learning at school, so you have to change the way you learn a little bit.
And from a community perspective, keeping our community groups going remotely. So we've got a fairly strong community planning group here, about 20 members. We've been having Zoom meetings for 4 or 5 months now, and you can see people wavering. So I think it's, from my perspective, it's about retaining their interest.
Well, initially, when the hall had to be closed, we had 4 weddings in the next 4 weeks. I had to sadly tell people that they couldn't hold their wedding at the hall that was already planned. And since then, there have been many community events, family events, and general get-togethers that haven't been able to be held. We've also had to cancel our annual Oxley Bush Market, which has been running for 40 years and is a major fundraiser as well as being a major event to get all the community together.
More recently, as we've gone into stage 4 lockdown, the hardest thing was closing our front door. Whilst we've been able to navigate changing services, changing the way we operated, shutting the front door for me was a very significant step, and I think the symbolism will stay with me for a very long time.
I guess for me, the most difficult change is probably working in isolation. Obviously, my role that I have at Aligned, I think last year I averaged about 21 days a month on the road, and living out of hotels and in different towns and cities right across the state and into Albury, and then being completely then locked down into isolation on your own is probably been a little bit challenging to adapt to. And then mirroring that with having to make some, having to stand down staff and so on that you're pretty close with. So that's probably been the toughest thing, seeing the people you care about hurt.
Stop wondering when it's going to end. Stop. I'm very much goal oriented. I like to look to the future and look towards a goal. And the constant thinking of, well, will it be finished by Christmas? I mean, would it have been finished by October? Would it have been finished by July? Gee, will it be finished next year? The wondering when it's going to end is the thing that is probably the most anxiety-driven or riddling for me.
Be a bit more aware of what's happening around myself and around my family to be more prepared. For me, it will be prepared for the obstacles you're about to face.
I think to slow down enough to better appreciate the small things, and to also really focus a little more clearly on the things around me.
I would probably say to myself, try and organise myself better so that I can actually organise time to see my parents before the pandemic started and cherish those times, because, now it's sort of harder because, I've missed their birthdays as well.
Slow down, stay calm, understand and not get too blown away by the change or the impacts that are being put in front of us, and know that we can work through it, but to stay calm and work through a planned process, even though things are changing every day and in all sorts of different ways.
That we should not take things for granted and cherish each and everything.
Stopping smelling a flower, stopping and looking at a range of different things. It's so easy to walk through life without seeing, and I think this is a time that we're all learning not to take it for granted, and I certainly hope it's something I can hold on to.
Really well. I'm really, really proud of how everyone has responded from our CEO, the executive, staff, councillors, really, really proud.
Well, we're getting information daily from the council of how many is affected in the area. So I think they're doing a good job in keeping us updated.
I think I'm very pleased that they haven't forgotten the older members of the community. As we look around outside, there's plenty of signage telling us to, smile, keep our distance. So they've done a great job, I think the council have.
I'm obviously completely biased in this question, but I think we've done an amazing job. As a small rural council, managing day to day is a huge challenge for us. We have a community with incredibly high expectations, and we have an organisation with a certain level of capability. So we always have a gap between our capability and our community's expectations. You add in a worldwide pandemic, and that gap just grows substantially. We have so many one-person departments in the end, so we have single points of dependency.
It's responded fantastically well. I'm incredibly proud of how the Shire has responded. Indeed, I'm incredibly proud of how local government has responded.
Our community group here, we have monthly meetings. When we went virtual, we started using Zoom. Zoom has a limit of about 35 minutes. Our meetings would go for an hour and a half or so. So I just went to council and say, how about if you paid for a full Zoom license for me, I can use it for our community meetings, and we'll use it for all the other community meetings as well. So we've shared that license, password, etc., with all the community groups in Tatura, there's about 4,000 people in Tatura, and they're all using it.
I disagree with what the Shire has done, because I believe what my mum says, and that it would be better to let everyone get it and evolve an immunity for it.
At the start, I would have thought perhaps a bit slow to respond. So I remember thinking very early on that pools and indoor areas should have been shut much earlier, but I was just so busy that it wasn't my role to be vocal about that.
I don't think people appreciate how difficult it is to lead communities through this sort of stuff. No one's really been through it for 100 years.
It has impacted me a lot, really, because I've got arthritis. I've had 2 new knees and a hip, and of course I used to go to hydrotherapy weekly. which was good. So I miss that. It's had a big impact on me, I think, on my health.
To be able to, in a way, be forced to stop and take this time together and work together to look after each other has in so many ways changed the way we do things.
I've felt very concerned about the workforce, but very concerned also about emerging issues in the community. Highly concerned about young people, for example.
It's impacted me quite a fair bit because I have 3 kids at home who are doing homeschooling all at the same time. And I've got one child who's turning 2 at the end of this month.
Just recently, because my wife's birthday was on the 27th of July, where, we usually go out and celebrate. My niece had a wedding that we were invited to, but she was only allowed to have 5 people. And of course, my birthday is at the end of the month, where we usually have a big get-together. So it's impacted really that we can't meet up with our family, which is important to us.
I only came to this job back in December and then had about 3 months in the job before we moved into the emergency. And then I've been at home since then. So I've missed out on meeting so many of my colleagues face-to-face. I've missed out on precious face-to-face briefing time with counsellors and have had to build relationships virtually.
Working from home has blurred my life between work and home life.
I don't so much talk about work-life balance. I think I have a life and work is a good chunk of my life, but I do like to have that sense of being able to put it aside for a bit and reconnect to some of those other things. And that's been a little bit more complicated. So that I think has probably been the biggest impact for me.
It's made me more reflective of my surroundings, my home, my garden and my neighbourhood.
The one thing I do worry about is my family and friends in the UK, and I don't know when I will get to see them again in person.
I'm a worrier. I worry a lot. So this really feeds my worry. I get, I'm not quite so concerned, I think, about health-wise. I'm very concerned about the economy and the long-term effects for Victoria.
Listen to the data. Listen to the science. Take notice of what is around you and pay attention. And when governments or health bodies put rules in place, take it seriously.
Recognising how important and how vital good leadership is. The importance of listening to experts.
That as a country, we put a price on human life above an economy.
Embrace change. There's obviously challenges, but some good can come from change. Nothing is forever. And the fact is we often need to stop and reflect, appreciate and adapt and work together. And because we can achieve anything, we will be able to continue to work our way through this, and there'll be some real positives and learnings from it. And I think down the track, those that have been heavily impacted at a young age, I'll just see that this is part of life. It's part of change. It's part of the challenge that we have to go through, and that anything can be achieved.
The tolerance and consideration of one another, I'd like to think that would shine through historically as being a really important aspect of why we've emerged from this pandemic, well, and that we can celebrate the humanity, I think, that's come through in so many aspects really positively, that we've got through this together, well, and in a position where we can recover strongly.
Is just the tenacity of the human spirit and the desire we have, even when we can't get together, to connect with each other and to keep our spirits up, and sense of humour, and people being so creative. If we look locally at what some of our businesses are doing and how quickly they've responded to enable themselves to stay in business, but also to enable them to continue to support the community. There's some amazingly innovative stuff.
Don't take your current position for granted. You know, when we talked about Spanish flu and when that happened, it was very much a historical issue. And I did kind of in the back of my mind think, well, that wouldn't happen now. They develop a vaccine pretty quickly, or the way we've configured stuff with internet and how we cope with things, we'd be pretty, we'd be able to cope with it much better. Don't take that for granted. It can happen, and it can happen to you as much as it's happened to us, and as much as it happened, back at the time of the Spanish flu.
I hope the message should be around how you can get through these things when people all work together, people stick to the rules, communities come together and support each other. I think they're the real positives out of it. What do I think we'll actually be talking about? Probably the fallout of the politics. And if it's a bit like the Spanish flu and a bit like the bushfires, people have very short memories, and within a very short period of time, we'll move on to the next crisis or the next situation. And I just hope that given the global scale of this, that the lessons are not lost between generations.
There's going to be a huge amount of data, so much more data than in any of our world wars about the on-ground reactions of how people are facing and coping with the pandemic. We've got endless videos, endless writings, endless pieces of social media, endless pieces of digital data and pieces about the way people are acting, reacting. I think they're going to be writing PhDs about this pandemic for the next century around the way people coped and the way they didn't cope.
And he said, it's not about all those other things. It's actually about who you love and who loves you.
Different methods of work and different methods of communication, more flexible arrangements and more diverse and connected ways to engage and communicate with each other. Everyone's ability to adapt so quickly to that has been fantastic, and I'm sure that there'll be an ongoing benefit long term from that.
I think as a fairly remote council, fairly rural and remote, 6 odd hours away from our capital city, and I think that one of the great things that will happen is access. So we have found, strangely, that in a time of isolation and restrictions, we've been able to participate in things in some quite different ways.
I now question why I ever bothered having that drive between Mornington and Hastings for a 20-minute meeting, when actually I could have just done this.
I think the most wonderful thing that's come out of this pandemic is the connectedness we have with all levels of government. There's no moat around government organisations right now.
This is simple. Washing your hands. I have never washed my hands so much in my life.
Just helping the community to recover and get back to that sense of normality, or whatever that new normality is. And it could be a long time that we're having to work with some form of restrictions until we get a vaccine, but helping the community and supporting the community through that, helping businesses to recover, and then really leverage the benefits of that. I think one of the things that we as a Shire are looking at, and I know a lot of rural councils are looking at, is if the ongoing travel ban is there for international travel, that's a huge opportunity for rural Victoria in terms of visitation and people wanting to go on holidays. They've got to go somewhere. And we've really got to capitalise on that market and use that to help our local economies bounce back as quickly as possible. And if that can come to fruition and our communities recover more quickly and people feel supported and their livelihoods are back up and running, then I feel that there'll be some positives coming out of this.
I am really looking forward to being able to meet up with colleagues again. And whilst I've been extolling the virtues of video conferencing during this conversation that we've had, as I kind of talked to you about very early on, I have missed that direct connection. I think, there's something about a workshop when you've got to work through a really challenging, difficult issue, which more often than not is about, the dynamics between particular teams or where people are coming from and the nuances that you get from actually being in a room with the team. I miss that.
Yeah, I think I'm really hungering for getting back to some face-to-face, experiences with my people. I'm really missing that.
just connecting with family and friends, the socialising. I think I found, being on Zoom is probably okay, but you go a bit Google-eyed after a while, and also the other thing too is it's not the same, if you're talking with people face to face. I'm quite a tactile person in a sense, and the sense of connection is not the same.
From a work perspective, it's reopening the doors, redefining what our new normal is. I know we won't go back to pre-COVID, but I do know we will go back to delivering the very strong services that we do.
Reconnecting with family and friends, we've been able to do that virtually and in different ways, but doing that together is really important to me. So I certainly miss that, and just the basics of getting out to dine or have a meal out, getting back to the gym, things of that nature too will be terrific to revert back to. And hopefully that'll be happening sooner rather than later.
Maybe go and see a band with my friends, just to normalise this, in a way to. Those are the things that I really, really miss.
I'm really looking forward to, I think, seeing my family who live in New South Wales and Canberra.
Just going to the pub and having a drink with your mates, really.
Well, I'm looking forward, really, to meeting up with all my children and grandchildren and being able to go out down the street, go to my hydrotherapy again, go to my social group, getting on with life again.
When this is all behind us again, I will be on the Silver Bird as quickly as I can.